So I'm going to introduce Sarah Beth, who's just really smart and is going to tell us how to be hybrid professionals. I'm excited to learn.
Thanks, Castle. I'm going to stand to do the intro. Welcome, everybody, to Startup Week. Yeah. It's day one, and I'm just overwhelmed by how much interest there was in this session. You plan these things, you're like, maybe 30 people might want to talk about this, and a lot of you are like, whoa, we want to hear about this. So hopefully we uncover some insights and give you some much needed food to think about on your professional identity, because I think it's a really relevant topic. We're in a strange time in society where people are doing a lot of things. How the heck do we express that? How do you demonstrate your unique professional identity so you stand out from the crowd? That's what I've been researching, and we're gonna unpack with this amazing panel. Before I dive in, I want to give you a little framing and history on what this topic means, how I define it, and how I even got onto it. And then we'll turn it over to introduce the panel one by one so you get to know them. We're going to have questions for a little bit so you hear their stories, their journeys of being hybrids, why I asked them to even join me. And then I'd love to have Q&A. So we've got about an hour and a half, and we've got a lot to talk about. So first of all, I'm Sarah Beth Burke. And a few years ago, let's say 5 or 6, I was really having a professional identity crisis. I had been an art teacher in the classroom, and then I'd been working in nonprofits, and I knew I wanted to break out. I was ready to have more impact. I had ideas. I wanted to transform education. But who would hire an art teacher to go redesign schools and come up with new curriculum and be a leader? I really had a box around me that was holding me back, and I didn't know how to break out. So I started experimenting with different ways to do my cover letter and resumes. I experimented, with introducing myself as an artist and an educator and a designer and trying to be more explicit about, I really bring 3 different kinds of value. And that actually worked. It got me some interviews, and I also realized I think I need to go back to grad school to get a degree that is really giving me more credibility that I'm an academic, because that was my focus, was education. So it was during my time in grad school when I started really falling apart and realizing I'm more than a teacher. How the heck do I talk about that? This idea of being more than my title was haunting me. And as the researcher at that time, I started interviewing people and asking them, how do you define yourself? What does it mean when you do marketing, but he does marketing and she does marketing? You're all using the same language, but you're not doing the same kinds of marketing. And I'm a teacher, but I'm not teaching like this person or that person. So why are we using the same words, but they don't represent who we are? And so by observing and interviewing and really just reading a lot of literature, I came up with a few insights. And so I want to start this with looking at today's landscape on LinkedIn. This is a snapshot I saw literally just 2-3 days ago on my feed. And you'll see some celebrities like Oprah Winfrey. That's her header in LinkedIn. She says, I'm a CEO, a producer, a publisher, an actress, and an innovator. I love that Oprah's an innovator. Jennifer Lopez is at the bottom. Actor, writer, director, producer, entrepreneur. Like, wait a minute, when did she become an entrepreneur? So language is fascinating. People are using dashes and hyphens and ampersands and all kinds of ways to show they do all these things. So then who the heck are they? I think that's the question on the table. When you do so many things, what do you really do? And what do you do well? What am I gonna hire you for if I look at those profiles up there? Raise your hand right now. Who has multiple business cards in their pocket? Quite a few hands. Who even might have different websites because you have multiple businesses you're operating? Yep. Who feels like they know how to nail it when someone says, hi, what do you do? It's so hard. Yeah, so that's what we're gonna talk about. Let me explain this a little more. Mind is blown, right? Like, what do we do about this? So does your title really express who you are and what you do? And are you just a list of professional identities are the questions we're exploring. This is me right now. So I'm standing up here talking about being a hybrid professional, but that's not my day job. The way I make money is I'm director of this thing called FutureBound, which is this innovation ecosystem solving problems for child development. You wouldn't know that about me. That's my other hybrid identity. On the side, I'm starting all this research and thought leadership on being more than your title. And I just did a TEDx talk, and I've created a workbook because people keep asking me for tools I didn't anticipate to start this as a business or a venture. I just left my last job at CU Boulder about 3 months ago, and people are like, oh my gosh, congratulations on your new startup. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What startup? And it's because more than my title is kind of gaining traction and momentum, and people think that's my new business. But the way I introduce myself is Director of FutureBound. So you can see the identity predicament I'm in of who am I when I'm standing up here right now? How do I explain that to you? So let's review the workforce and the types of professionals, because this is my theory. First of all, we have this thing called singularity. Now that matters. We need people that have one professional identity. They're an expert, they're a specialist in something. They go really deep. When someone is doing brain surgery on you, you want them to be really good at that one thing. But then we have multiplicity in the workforce. That's people that are freelancers, they're in the gig economy. They might be polymaths or multi-talented, multi-passionate. There are so many words I've heard to explain this group, the slashes. And that's all important. This could be career changing over your lifetime. It could also be in one role in an organization, you do 10 different things, even though you have one job title. For me, that's multiplicity. But here's the catch. What happens when you actually cross circles together and it turns into this? Hybridity. Hybridity is when you've got the Venn diagram because things are overlapping. You are not just either or, you're and, you are all of that. You're working from the middle. That's the new idea. How do we talk about that? So one other idea is that we've been using these terms. Has anyone seen the T-shaped, pie-shaped, comb-shaped, broken comb? It's really weird in my mind because it's saying people have a depth of expertise, that's the vertical, or they also have some general knowledge across the top. If you're pie-shaped, you have a couple verticals. If you're a comb, you have more. If you're broken comb, you have shorter and longer parts of the comb. It kind of gets crazy. And for me, I don't want to express myself as, hi, I'm Sarah Beth, I'm a broken comb, what are you? Are you pie? Cool. That doesn't make sense. So that's why the hybrid to me is a new way of thinking about this. This to me is the hybrid, it's the pizza. If you eat a pizza, you can eat one ingredient at a time. That's the idea of being a multiple. I'm the marketer, now I'm doing sales, now I'm doing a little bit of administrative work, oh, and I do some finance. But the pizza is when you put all those ingredients together and you throw in a little bit of like, well, I also teach salsa lessons and I also have a wood shop and I build my own furniture. It's like, wait a second, how does that all go together? But think about the crazy pizzas that like you'll get at some pizza joint that has pineapple and peppers, and you're like, these ingredients are gonna be awful, and you eat it, you're like, that was the best pizza of my life, because it was so darn unique. That combination is what made it fabulous. That's what a hybrid is. You are your own recipe of pizza. So this is my definition of a hybrid professional. They blend and combine multiple professional identities together, working from the intersections. It's the integration, not the segregation or separation, that is truly what matters. Capture that one in your head, integration. I know this is a busy slide, but this is my base idea of all this. Do professional identity math. That's my core tool. So if I use myself as an example, I'm at least 3 identities. I'm an artist, I'm a designer, and I'm a researcher. So what happens when I'm the artist plus designer, the researcher plus artist, or all 3 at once? That's my unique thing. What am I doing when I combine all those together? So if you can explain what you do in your intersections, that's a new way to introduce yourself. We're going to talk to the panelists about how they integrate and blend and combine. But then it becomes challenging of what do you call that? Who are you in the middle? That's your opportunity to rebrand and come up with your own title for artist, educator, designer, researcher. For me, I use 1 or 2 kind of interchangeably depending on the day or the audience. I either say, hi, I'm an innovation strategist, because when I'm blending these 3 together, I'm really coming up with new radical ideas in the educational space or whatever community I'm in, and I use a lot of visual imagery and creativity to drive those ideas. So innovation strategy or creative disruptor are 2 titles I like to call myself. Also, one other key point about this, I use primary professional identities. So when you saw Oprah's list or any of the other LinkedIn titles, there was like 3 or 4 or 5, like you can have like 20 identities. You need to dial it down to your core. Your primary identities are the ones you use the most, like on a daily basis. They also bring you the most joy and energy and delight. So if you're like, yeah, I do finance, marketing, sales, branding, yada, yada, but you don't really love 4 of those, you really love the sales and the branding, then don't talk about the other ones as your primary. Just focus on how do you do the math with your primary identities, because that's really your strength. That's your unique spot. This is just a fun slide of weird titles people are coming up with that show hybridity. Sometimes it's like marrying 2 words together. So a child influencer on Instagram is called a kidfluencer. Someone who is a designer, strategist, catalyst could be a brand invigorator. Or let's say a badass marketer, they could call themselves a groundbreaking storyteller. The hybrid titles are much more exciting and enticing and catch your attention. Because the point of an introduction, when I come up and say, hi, what do you do? And you tell me you're a groundbreaking storyteller, that's new in my mind. I've never heard of that before. And I'm gonna be like, wow, tell me what that is. The goal is for them to be curious and to ask you to expand because that title is so unique. If I just said, hi, I'm a marketer, you'd be like, great, I've just met 10 of those. Like, cool, I think I know what you do. So your spin, the way that you use language is really important in hybridity. And then this is the last, actually one more. Notice that when you added those words together, it was about the relationships of those words together, not just the singular words. Your ability to show why, working on branding and working on storytelling and working on sales, how those are related, that's the magic. So these are the 4 critical insights I want you to marinate on today, and we're going to explore in a moment. This is what I've really been hearing as I interview and research people. One is we've been lacking a word to describe who we are. We didn't know to use the word hybrid until someone told us you can use the word hybrid. That's the game changer. By just having this tool in your toolbox, you open the dialogue, you change the script, and you have a new way to frame who you are. That's what's really radical here, because this was missing. Before it was singularity or pie-shaped or these other things. We needed new language to introduce ourselves. Second is permission. I hear this all the time. People are like, wait, you're allowed to integrate? Like I can connect those things? It's okay, I don't have to separate and just show them like, oh, I'm really good at this, but I'm also good at that. Like combination is okay, so give yourselves permission to integrate. Second is this idea of math. Once you get clear on your intersections, then you know your unique value. That's why that's so important, to break it down to what you do and add it together or mix it up, and then you have a new way to celebrate and talk about yourself. And this is the hardest one too, I notice for people. So they've done their math, they've looked at their parts, they have a new sense of why they're unique, but they're scared. They're like, I can't call myself groundbreaking storyteller, like that's not really who I am. And I'm like, wait a minute, you have to own that. You have to have confidence. If you want to tell people that's who I am and that's what I do, go tell them. You have to believe it in yourself for other people to believe it in you. So that's what we're going to hear from the panel, is how did they go through permission and integration and their math and then owning it. And to be honest, I think most of them are still struggling with this too. You're not going to hear that we all have it figured out. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it to this amazing panel and sit down and join them. Hello panelists, thanks for being here. One at a time, can you tell us obviously your name? I'd love to hear what your job title is today, like what you have on LinkedIn. And just the short introduction, like if you were networking in this room, how would you introduce yourself in that nutshell? And then lastly, I'm curious, what is the college degree that you actually studied? Because sometimes it's really fascinating to be like, you went to school for X, and now you're calling yourself Y. So we'll just see how that plays out. Good? Karen.
Hi, my name is Karen Nimmo, and I went to school for information systems and marketing. And when I went to school, they were 2 very different things, and today they're very much integrated into each other, which kind of explains where I'm at in that intersection of things. My current title, I have no idea what my current title is. I used to work in corporate and startup and product development for over 20 years. I left about 1.5 years ago, And about a week after I left, the guy at I had to change my phone, get a new phone. The guy at AT&T was like, so what do you do? And I was like, what do I do? I'm no longer the vice president of product. I'm no longer in tech. And so it was like one of these crises moments for me. And I spent the last year kind of trying to figure out what that is. But so I'd say right now I'm an entrepreneur, but I do a lot of different things. Mainly, I have Found Her, which is a creative community for female artists, makers, and entrepreneurs here in Denver. And when I tell people what I do, it depends who I'm talking to, really. And I either tell them about Founder if I think they're going to be interested in Founder, or I have a company called The Product Collective, which I do, it's kind of like an innovation consultancy, so I do both of those. And then from a hybrid professional perspective, Sarah has helped me a little bit, and I'm really a creator, visionary, and a connector, so I like to call myself a creative visionector.
Hi everybody, I'm Erin Huizinga. Nice to see all of you here. I went to undergrad at CU Boulder and studied advertising and art history, and then I went to design school in Atlanta for a couple of years after that, finishing school there called Portfolio Center, where I just worked on my portfolio in order to get a job at an agency after that. So I moved to Chicago for my first design job shortly after that. Now my current title is founder and learning design director at Burrow & Black. So we have a studio here in Rhino. And what we do human-centered design for education and learning clients. So we specialize in education and learning, going beyond human-centered design itself. We started as social impact, and we sharpened in for all of the reasons we're talking about today on education and learning.
I'm Scott Shrake. I run the Institute for Entrepreneurship. I guess my official title is Director of Entrepreneurship. I am used to being the most average dressed person on a panel, but when I saw my co-panelists today, I knew I was really in trouble. So thank you for setting the bar real high. So I did not stand out on that side and setting my brand. So I am an engineering PhD. I got a PhD in engineering sustainability. I had a med device company. I teach design thinking in our Richardson Design Center, and I run an institute in the College of Business. So I still don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up, but that mix is kind of how I've led my educatedpreneur. I've had companies that have gone well. I've had one that have gone poorly. I love the pushing through startups, but I've realized that what makes me excited and what gets me up in the morning is helping people become the best version of their self. And so that's why I stick in higher education, is I find so much more satisfaction from enabling others to be successful and follow their passions and do those things that inspire them than I do trying to create another company. And so that's why I do what I do. Did I miss anything? All right, onward.
Awesome. Hi everyone, my name is Brian Corrigan, and ditto to all of this, I'm actually a blend of all these people right here. I tell people I'm actually not a hybrid, I'm a tribrid. I'll try almost anything. So I got my degree in business and design, and I pretty much tell people that I'm a creative strategist working at the intersection of creative economy, technology, and community development.
I did ask the panel to make this a little bit more interactive, so if they have questions of each other, we're going to be just tossing that microphone back and forth, but I'm going to kick it off. Let's just jump right in with the aha moment. When did you start to realize that you didn't fit the mold of just being one thing? You really were that Jack and Jill of all trades, but you were sensing like, I'm more than one thing. And I kind of want to start with Scott's story, where you were freshman year of college and you had to take some assessment and you were the outlier. Can you begin with that for us?
Yeah. So it probably should have resonated with me then. And there's, like, looking back and reflecting, there's been so many times where I realized I didn't really fit into the box that most engineers are put into. But my freshman year, I went to University of Pittsburgh for it, and they had us take a personality assessment. There was 300 plus other engineers in the room, and they graphed us and put us on this quadrant. Everyone was clustered down here. There's a couple people in each one of these, and then there's one dot way up at the top, whatever the quadrant was. I guess it's 4. And my professor said, "Who's this?" And I was like, "Okay, should I stand up, or like, what do I do here?" And I raised my hand. He goes, You don't belong here. You're a liberal arts major." So the assessment was whether you used emotion and feelings to make decisions or purely logical, right? And having done a ton of training in engineering, I understand the importance of logic, but I also, at that point in my career, recognized that people are important and humans have value, and we probably need to factor those considerations in to what we're doing. So I remember leaving that classroom, calling my dad, who was the CEO of a pretty big engineering firm, and I said, "Dad, I don't belong here. I mean, we took this personality assessment, and I have feelings and emotions. This just isn't my crowd." And he said, "If you can stay in there, stay in there. And if you can develop that technical acumen, that logical side, with your people skills and your soft skills, you'll be so far above where your counterparts are, 5, 10 years from now. Those are the people that companies want to hire. Those are the people that come in and make big changes." So then I immediately switched degrees to business. It was good advice, I just wasn't ready to take it at the time, but found my way back into engineering for a couple more degrees after that. But that was my first, I don't fit in this box. There was a lot more of those along the way, but that was there's something different for what I'm doing.
And Brian,
Yeah.
your interview, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So I actually had a recruiter reach out to me, and it's interesting because kind of going back to the permission thing, the recruiter, when we were talking about everything, was just like, "So you're a hybrid?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am a hybrid." I didn't tell her I was a tribrid. I just figured that out. But it's interesting when someone gives you permission, like Sarah Beth was talking about, to kind of just be that thing that you already are, like you can own it more. So I do think that that's like, again, kind of what you were talking about earlier, is now you all have permission to just be the thing that you are, which is very empowering and very freeing. And I don't know why we have to have people tell us who we are, but it's definitely a good trick.
Oh, yeah, Erin, do you want to add on? What's your aha?
Sure. So for me, my aha happened during my time in Chicago. Like I said, I graduated from design school in Atlanta. I moved to Chicago, and I was a graphic designer through and through. Earlier in my career, I was working at small design studios and ad agencies and things in Chicago. And then I had the opportunity to work in an innovation firm called IDEO, and then at Gravity Tank, which is similar to IDEO in Chicago. And I had this sort of professional identity crisis moment when we were working on a project at Gravity Tank. And I was in a bay with people that were completely different than myself professionally. So an anthropologist and somebody who had graduated from Kellogg as a business degree person from Northwestern, and a number of other folks that really filled out the room. And I was the only graphic designer in the room. And Dave, the business strategist from Kellogg, started critiquing the work. And I realized, wow, this is really hard, because I was used to working with people just like myself at the design studios earlier on. But it's also cool because it sort of doubles as this double critique before you present things to the client. And so I started thinking about the fact that, I can own the fact that I enjoy different things, that I am indeed multidisciplinary as well. And I realized I had been teaching for a long time. I taught dance when I was little, growing up into school, into college, and that translated into teaching design in Chicago. So at a time I was teaching people that were essentially the same age as I was. But I started owning this identity of teaching, and that was the light bulb for me around, I can own teaching just as much as I own this design thing. And that's how we ended up where we are today, around really loving and embracing the idea that we can make learning fun and more interesting and more compelling through using design and using this love for teaching.
So mine was just a little moment, and it was probably pretty insignificant at that time, but I had a boss who, so I've always been creative. I probably missed the boat on being an artist, but I come from a family of immigrants, and success was defined by being a doctor, a lawyer, or working in computers. So I've always, whether I did quality assurance on computers to, strategy, I've always infused my creativity in any deliverable that I do. And I had a boss not too long ago who got really frustrated with me, and I created this product roadmap. And I think one of my superpowers is being able to take really complex concepts and put them together in a visual way that connects people to it and helps them understand it through visualization. So everything I do is creative and kind of laid out visually. And he was so frustrated that I had spent the time to make it pretty, and and he thought I wasted a lot of time on it, which I didn't, because it just comes naturally to me. But it was one of those moments where I was just kind of caught off guard and thought, I wasn't supposed to bring that to work. That was a talent that wasn't in my box. That was outside of my box. And I stepped over the line a little bit, bringing that to the table. But I have always thought, like, that's what makes me different, and that's what makes me unique. So that was like a moment where I really thought, I do a lot of different things. I bring a lot of different talents, and they definitely don't fit nicely into a box.
So I want to push on Karen a little bit, because when we were talking prior, you were like, I'm a unicorn. Like, I can just do all these things. It's why I'm so great. But you're still trying to figure out, and yes, like that,
exactly
yes,
like that.
but I'm going to say it for you that way. You are great. I mean, the idea of Found Her and the work you're doing was born out of your unique background, passion, skill sets, experiences. Like, that's how all the great ideas and ventures and things all of you are growing and building are coming from your origin story, like your backgrounds. And what I'm hearing, Karen, and we've been talking about this, is you're like in this moment of, I don't know who I am right now. Can you talk a little bit about like the struggle that you're in?
So like I said, after I left my head of product job in startup, I started doing a lot of different things. And right now, I just updated my LinkedIn resume, or LinkedIn at 3 in the morning on Saturday night, because I had this epiphany moment. But it took about 1.5 years to get there, because I'm like, people are gonna think I'm literally schizophrenic. Like, someone will look at this and be like, dude, she's got problems. So right now, if I was to tell you everything I was doing right now, I'm the founder of Found Her. I am the virtual chief technology officer for Floyd's. I am the head of brand for a CBD company, helping them do all their marketing and branding and taking their product from a product company into a lifestyle company. I am the founder of a startup that's trying to change a business model within the beauty industry, looking at kind of pricing strategy. And I sit on a board for the CU Art Museum. And these are literally all the things I'm doing right now. And I'm thinking about a subscription box business plan as well. So if I listed all that, I think people would be like, I literally have 7 jobs right now. And they'd be like, dude, how can she do any one thing well? And the reality is again, going back to superpowers, I've always worn so many different hats in my job. So whenever I've taken on a new job, I always, I figured out how to do that job, and that job ended up taking me about 20% of my time. And then I'd always look for special projects or things and gaps in the organization. So I'd start taking those on, and I'd work in marketing. I do all graphic design. I do product. I love strategy and innovation, but I can take it all the way down to like building a project plan if I have to. I can do a little coding. And so it kind of goes up and down and around, but I did that because of all my jobs, I've worn so many different hats that it actually comes naturally to me to do many things. And if I try to focus on one, I just get bored. And so I'm more effective doing all these things. But again, the complex is, how do you explain that to people? How does a recruiter look at my LinkedIn profile and say, oh yeah, she's great for this marketing role or this product role or this technology role, or what is she exactly? So that's kind of where I am. And finally, I put it all under one umbrella called the Product Collective. And really what I'm all about is driving innovation and end-to-end customer experience through digital and physical experiences and how they come together in an integrated way. And so that's what my 3 a.m. Thing was all about.
Okay, that was an amazing elevator pitch. Just trim it down a little,
Yeah.
and we almost understand what you do. But who doesn't resonate with that? I'm sure so many people in the audience have like 3 side gigs and 4 more ideas in the pipeline. and a different day job, and this list is not, like, you're not the only one facing that. I think part of the conversation we're not having today, which is probably next year's Startup Week panel, is how do we help inform employers about this idea of hiring a hybrid? Because it takes a different set of questions, a different open-mindedness to look for someone for all the multifacetedness and multidisciplinary ideas and skills they bring instead of just the one line. So the hiring part of this conversation, and I think the training and the retaining that person in your company, because they need different professional development. They need a lot of mobility and autonomy within their position because they're so flexible. And to Karen's point and others on this panel, they get bored. If they can't be running multiple work streams in 12 directions, they're probably gonna leave and go start something else because that's what they do. So along those lines, I'm gonna throw this to Brian because you're kind of a master of having some side projects. You wanna talk about what it looks like to bring all that together?
Well, the funny thing is, okay, so when I said that I worked in creative economy, technology, and community development, who got that? Like, yeah. So they also call that like creative placemaking. Anyone heard of that? Yes. Maybe a few. The funny thing is, like, I'm trying to sell myself to like around this concept that not even a lot of people know about. So it's kind of like this double whammy, and I guess I just like love a good challenge, or I'm like, again, I'm totally crazy, but a little crazy. But I'm gonna say this, I think the thing about like an artist, or if you look at the creative process, it's really kind of like, I've been thinking about it like all these breadcrumbs, and like when you look back, it makes total sense how you got there, right? And I think the whole idea is like, that's your material. So how do you take each one of those breadcrumbs and turn it into like a new loaf of bread? And the funny thing is I don't even eat bread, but I love that analogy. And so I think like that's the whole thing when it comes to talking to people, is like really walking them down that path. So by the end of it, they're just like, oh yeah, I totally get it, you're hired.
Do you want to talk about any of your side projects along the way,
Sure, yeah, so I used to actually teach design at the Corcoran College of Art and Design in Washington, DC, and that's where I got into this idea of creative placemaking. So when I moved to Denver, I started working on contract with the city of Denver, and pretty much we just did a ton of these like crazy projects out in the middle of the street, and each one of those projects really kind of turned into its own kind of new business and thing. So I turned 3 blocks of downtown Denver into this interactive arcade. And I'm also co-chair of the designer track for Denver Startup Week. So this is really one of my projects right here. And I also like just started selling experiences from really what I call the experience cart. And really kind of like, again, just trying to figure things out as they pop into my head, and then how you build a business model around it. Yeah.
I have a couple of little anecdotal thoughts. I love what you're saying about, you know, how do you describe, you are describing all of these identities, all these things that you do. And I want to share with everybody here, there's a book called Linchpin. Has anyone read Linchpin? It's Seth Godin. It's a great book, great resource. It's a way to kind of talk about this idea that you're an entrepreneur of your own professional experience. And you can own that. And another thing that Karen said too is that I was up until 3 a.m. changing what my LinkedIn said, and that's okay. You know, that's a good thing that you feel the agency and the empowerment to be able to do that. And for us at Burrow & Black, you know, if I saw that I looked at your LinkedIn profile 2 days ago and then today it says something different, I'd be like, I'm gonna ask you about that because I find that kind of interesting. Like, what happened there and what changed and what kind of experience and sort of growth are you personally going through? So it's good.
So when I interview people about their hybridity, first of all, they're like, I've never even conceptualized myself that way. Like, wait a minute. And so they have to process that. And so I try and make it easier on them. And asking people, what do you do in your hybrid space? What are those intersections? How does that look in your work? That's, again, a foreign concept. They've never thought about that. So what I want to throw to you is to think about, when do you feel your best in your work? Because people can start with the moments when they feel amazing, when you're in that flow, that zone, all the good ideas and your expertise are just merging together. that's your hybridity. So start with how it feels. So I want you all to reflect on that, and then talk to me and talk to the audience about what are you doing in those moments when you're at your high vibe. I'm really curious to hear what that's like for Scott in particular, since you're the most like formal in your role on the panel. But it looks different how you're blending and shaping your work streams when you're in your hybridity. So describe the moments when you feel your best and what are you doing in your hybridity?
It's interesting because when I feel my best is usually when I'm struggling the most too. Like I love just really messy, uncomfortable, shitty problems. Like put me in the most complex environment you can think of. Let me mire in that for a couple hours and look and pull, figure out where the strategic alliances, where the partnerships are, how we can detangle this to more intelligently weave it together. And it's exhilarating, but it's also pretty exhausting as you're trying to pull all the different pieces of the equation together.
And Scott, in those moments, what identities are coming up?
It's probably just my GSD, get stuff done identity, where I cannot listen to people. Let me take it back. Empathetically, I'm fantastic at listening to people and helping them understand where they're at and accept where they're at. But I also love working through those problems quickly and helping them take action and agency and ownership over that piece, which is another reason I stay in education. So for me, it's a mix of get stuff done, my opportunity sort of recognition, my life cycle analyst, and then the engineering side of things of architecting and integrating these things together. And the people side of things of realizing that, again, humans are the element that makes all of these things work, and having to understand how those play into the process to get these big systemic changes or cultural changes, or even just collaborative opportunities where, believe it or not, in higher education, it's still kind of siloed in some universities. So figuring out how, it's not tongue-in-cheek at all. So figuring out how we can get people to understand that we can grow the pie by working together. I think reframer is another huge part of what I do, is helping people realize that there's different perspectives that we can take into this messy challenge, rather than this is the crappy hand we're dealt. This is all the outs and plays that we have with this hand and other avenues we haven't looked at. I don't know if that answered the question. I touched on a lot of things. Yeah, please.
So my summary for Scott would be, when he's in the messiest, craziest, most complicated spaces of thinking, that's your hybridity, because you're bringing the engineer, the entrepreneur, the GSDer, the analyst all together to play together, and even the empathetic side of you. Does that sound right? So that's your hybridity. That's when you love what you're doing.
That's why I get pulled into a lot of special projects. That is, I'd say 20% of my job is running the Institute, 80% of it is special projects of every way, shape, and form that come down, whether it's figuring out, continuing to build our international presence for CSU, or just putting collaborations together with our nonprofit partners, forcing faculty to assess new opportunities for teaching and curriculum, helping our entrepreneurs get more integrated into the community. Like, it truly is a full ecosystem, and I like that other 80% more, the same, if not more, than that 20% of running and building an institute, which is fantastically inspiring, but solving everyone else's problems, avoiding my own, fantastic.
To the others in the group, when you're at your most alive, what are you doing? Because that exposes your hybridity.
Yeah, for me, it's been an interesting journey of entrepreneurship, the last 5 years or so, where you kind of realize, you want people around you that are good at the things you're not good at. So I quickly learned I'm not an operations director at all, so we needed somebody to help with that. What I love so much, and so that I'm not on QuickBooks and billing and doing all the operations sorts of things, what I love is meeting with people one-on-one, and meeting with folks that maybe we could help and partner with. And I've always been on the consulting side, working with agencies and consulting in that way. I've never been in an in-house role, so I reflect on that often too, where I love cross-pollinating learning between different kinds of clients as well, where if we're working with a K-12 school, And then we're working on a professional development initiative. Like there's some neat kind of learning things that I can share or pass along as just tips and tricks or whatever. So I love one-on-one meetings like more than anything. I just love them. And so that's translated as, I do a lot of, business development and meeting with people and figuring out, is there a way we could help or partner in some way that would be beneficial to you as this person sitting across from me having coffee. So that's where I'm absolute most happiest. I love it. If I could have 8 hours of coffee meetings, I would. And that was a big transformation for me, as you might be thinking. I grew up as a graphic designer, and I hit a wall. 5 years, 6 years into my career in Chicago, I'm like, I can't sit here and move pixels around and design 300-page websites for my entire career. I'm gonna die. I wasn't talking to anybody all day. So it was this transformation around knowing a little bit more about who I was and what I really wanted, and owning that and being honest about that.
So actually, I think when I was going through my brain, I was like, when was the first time that I really had that kind of self-actualization? Because I think that's kind of a little bit what this hybridity is about. So, I know. Well, I saw it in the notes here, so. But my self-actualization happened in the 6th grade, so early bloomer. Anyway, so I love Christmas lights, and I would pretty much decorate my yard for Christmas, because if you think about it, that's really kind of creative placemaking. It's really bringing vibrancy to the street. So I was like, why can't I bring vibrancy to the classroom? Because it's so boring in here, right? And so my 6th grade teacher actually let me put Christmas lights all around my desk. And I had an extension cord all the way from the back of the room, all the way to the front of the room. And the cleaning lady had to move it every single night. And for whatever reason, that teacher really I think did something really great for me, because that was the first time where I felt accepted really for being this hybrid, or really myself.
Yeah, okay.
Just that note of hybrid is you bringing all of what you do together. It's finally the whole you, right? It's that holistic idea. So instead of, again, being separated into these certain entities or individual professional titles, you just get to represent yourself. And I think we're in this era of the individual, you being you. That is what the hybrid is, and giving you a new way to express and own that. So this idea of self-actualization is when you stack one thing plus one thing together, you don't get two, you just get a whole. So keep chewing on that for a little bit.
The whole loaf.
The whole, yeah.
The whole loaf.
The whole loaf, yeah.
From the bread.
From the breadcrumbs, thanks, Brian. I would love to hear, how you all have advice for getting hired as a hybrid. So what are the things you're learning of how you need to express yourself or talk about yourself or put things on LinkedIn to help people, pay you for what you do? How are you figuring that out?
So I have a story that will explain this. I worked in agency. I was the head of client services, but I worked for an agency that was really about, their ethos was design thinking and human-centered design. But I was in love with building product and experiences. That's really what I wanted to do. And so there was a head of product job, and this is how I got into product. And I went and applied for it, and I think the reason I even got an interview in the first place is because my resume was extremely visual. It was just a 1-page or 11 by 17 kind of, and everything was visually laid out on kind of a map of my experience. That was my resume. So I think that got me in the door, and I started meeting with them, and halfway through, probably 20 interviews, some guy was sitting there interviewing me, and he's like, so why do you think you can be the head of product when you don't even have product listed on your resume? And I was like, oh, wow, yeah. I've been kind of on the periphery of it, but I feel like I can do it. I know I can do it. And so then I kind of broke it down to them of, well, what do you need to be successful at building product? You need to be able to lead teams. You need to be able to have a vision and be able to understand your customer and who they are and have empathy for them. You need to be able to look into the future and see where you want to go as a company. You need to be able to create this brand and all the touch points around it that embody your values as a community. You need to be able to consumer insight. So I started pulling all these things that you needed to be able to have to be a great product leader. And then I could demonstrate through my experiences that I had all of that. I could do all of that. And so by kind of shifting the lens in which they were looking at, I actually was able to get the job after 20 interviews because I was able to kind of shift it and realign it with my strengths and let them see that it wasn't a linear job, but it kind of was more like three-dimensional, right? So that's an example.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. I love that idea that you have to decode what it is that you can do. So for us, I find myself decoding what a designer does, essentially, right? I'm sure everybody in the room has this notion of when you say you're a designer, if you are indeed a designer, everybody's gonna have a different take on what that means, right? Whether it's strategic or tactical. Are you a graphic designer? Are you a industrial designer? What kind, an architect? Everybody has a vision of what that means. So to kind of go that level deeper and explain, we're problem solvers. We're typically pretty optimistic compared to most people. We try to make things better for people. We can design a new program because we can sort of see the forest for the trees, perhaps, and that's the value of having somebody from the outside come in and kind of assess and think through some things with you. So always kind of decoding, and the empathy with the person that you're talking to, right, or interviewing with, researching where they're coming from, what their own background is. Maybe they've never even hired or worked with a designer in their life. So, starting from that level of okay, let's define what designers do and how they work and how you might benefit from, collaborating with someone like that kind of thing.
So as the traditionalist, apparently on the panel, I had 5 different resumes when I came out of grad school, one for sales, one for marketing, one for engineering, one for consulting, one for product development, and all 5 of them led to job offers and jobs I didn't want to do. And some of them did not lead to job offers as well. But there was this experience where, fortunately, I was working at a cool tech startup at the time while I was doing my PhD, and that gave me an exposure to wearing a whole bunch of different hats in a way that could be rewarded outside of my traditional views of success, which was I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm gonna go work inside this firm or go a tenure track faculty member. And as I looked at every job that came across my way, whether that was starting a life cycle assessment consulting division for one of the big 4 or going and being a tenure track faculty, literally every single job's this sucks. I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And what I needed was one organization to take a chance on me, and I was lucky that they did. And that has been sort of the history of, if you look at my journey throughout the past, it was getting somebody to believe in me, to give me a shot. And so fortunately I landed at ASU, Arizona State University, which is the #1 for innovation 5 years in a row. And so for me to be able to come into an environment where innovation and entrepreneurship and disruption was the norm was the best possible thing that could have happened to me. Because again, I came in, I got to build what I wanted to build what I was hired to build within the engineering college there, and flip education on its head from my perspective with the experience that I had, but also build a whole bunch of other really cool stuff. And I had that flexibility to do it, where if I would have taken the job at IBM or Deloitte or those at that time, 15 years ago, I may not have had the opportunity to operate. And I was lucky to have some really great connections inside those companies, and VPs and presidents are passing my resume around to the units and I don't know what the hell to do with this guy, right? So fortunately, I was able to land at a spot where innovation was accepted, encouraged, and I was able to make a name for myself in that space as a productive educational disruptor, and became kind of a thought leader in the field of entrepreneurial education and engineering education, and flipping these things to fix a broken education system. So I got to deploy all of my talents when I was originally hired to do X job over here. I was able to do X, Y, and Z, quickly move my way up in an organization is the biggest university in the country, to being able to do a lot of really, really, really cool stuff. And that has since made it so now I don't have to turn in a resume, right? Now I'm fortunate enough that I've been lucky enough that someone gave me a chance. I capitalized on that success, and I've been able to humbly kind of do whatever I want now. And I'm lucky that CSU has continued to offer me that platform where, again, build something, come in, do your job, build what you're supposed to do, but also, if you continue to succeed in these roles, you can keep doing really, really cool stuff. So I don't have good advice beyond get someone to take a chance on you, network, and try to create that value within an organization, even if it's not what you were hired to do. Find managers and support staff that will let you do your job, crush that job, but also add value to the organization in a way that they may not have perceived you doing initially, and then you can write your own path going forward. But that first job's a pain in the ass. Or create your own company.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about that.
So I have a ton of people take chances on me. So, and I think that that's really kind of given me really kind of the knowledge to be able to really talk to a lot of different types of people. So working in creative placemaking, you work really with economic development, you work with city planners, you work with workforce development people, all of these different kinds of people. And it's like really kind of that code switching. I think you were calling it decoding, right? So I think like having that kind of code switching is really important. And then also like I work with like Fortune 500 companies and like say the Colorado Rockies. What's important to them is a lot different than workforce development people. Well, maybe if you can make that link. Or just like, again, it kind of comes back to just, I think for me, like really understanding the questions that you have to ask to people to get back to the values of what they're interested in, and then talking their language so they totally get what it is that you're trying to do.
Just to add on, I think it all comes down to solving problems that need to be solved for whatever entity you're trying to get to hire you to do meaningful work for them. If you come in and alleviate their pain points, most of the time you're going to be rewarded for it if you're in the right company, the right culture. But come in, create value, and I think you really make your own path from there moving forwards.
Just one more thing too, just adding stories. It might go without saying a bit, but adding really good stories to the conversation that inspire and help people understand your hybridity, right? Like, what's the depth of knowledge, almost like thesis level, that you can bring to a conversation that inspires them to ask more questions of you, that there's a lot of trust that can start to get developed there.
This is great. I just want to re-emphasize a few things they said because I heard so many good messages. The hybrid, to me, is your unique value prop. So to echo what Scott was saying, like, you need to be able to solve that problems, but how are you solving it better or differently than someone else they could hire? Your hybridity is you showcasing that unique thing or trait or background that you bring that other people won't match. It's your differentiator. So helping clarify that and being really explicit. Don't assume people are going to pick that up or understand it. That's why language and articulating this stuff matters. Literally, if you say, well, I'm a hybrid, how many people are you going to hire who have this trifecta of ingredients? That can be a way to sort of give a sentence prompt to help a potential employer or customer understand, oh, you're the hybrid, I'm going to hire you because of that. But then you explain what that means. I think the explanation plus the word really matter. This idea of getting lucky, needing someone to take a chance on you, I heard that across a lot of people. Or if someone doesn't take a chance on you, then you have to go out on your own and do it because you understand that idea of start your own thing. I think there's a sense they were implying of the mindset of the person employing you too. They have to be really open. They have to be willing to see your breadth and depth in new ways. So not everyone understands this concept of a hybrid yet. I think we are all in this room on the leading edge of a new kind of workforce, and it's going to take our collective effort to educate and build awareness of people work with a million different skill sets today, and we keep going back and learning and training and growing. You want that growth mindset. That's a huge thing people are looking to have in employees or in companies. So you have to find those early adopters, people who understand a hybrid is an asset. and they're looking for it. If you have to really hammer into an employer, well, you want me because I do these 5 things, and they don't get it, you probably don't want to work for them anyway. You want to work for the people that are like, I see a lot of potential in Scott and Karen. She doesn't even have the word product in her resume, but I see she gets it in a way. I'm going to take a chance on her. All my background, my jobs, I'd say people took a chance on me, and I was given sort of carte blanche of like building new programs for them. That idea of like 80% of my work has been like, go do something badass, do it really well. We can see you have that talent, and there's 20% of this work that really has to get done too. Maybe it wasn't always that ratio, but I had opportunity. So I'm gonna throw one more question to them, and then I wanna open it up to see what's on your minds. Kind of the final thought is really, why do you think this topic matters? Why is hybridity important to you? Why are you on this panel? Why do you think people in this room are interested in this conversation? So just the relevance of this today, and any parting words, and then we'll toss questions to the audience.
Well, I think there's a reason the gig economy is growing at the rate that it is people their authenticity and who they are have become more and more important, and purpose and passion and feeling like you're fulfilling what it is you're meant to do. And oftentimes in today's corporate structures, I don't think there are the tools and the mechanisms to really enable that. Sometimes you get lucky and you work for someone that really understands that. But I think we are just striving to be more ourselves and find that, and find an organization that kind of embraces that, where you can drive value. And so hybridity is very important because it's who we are. We're all hybrid. We're not two-dimensional creatures, you know. We've got a lot of different sides to us, and not any one person is exactly the same. And so for employers not to see that is extremely short-sighted. And I just think it's important that we start to own it instead of hide it. And a big reason, the reason I started Founder is I worked with all these women who had this job, and they did great at their job, but they all had side projects. They all had side things that they were hiding from the people that they worked with every single day, these talents and passions, and all of us have that. And so if we could bring that all to the workforce, to our day-to-day jobs, think of the impact we can make in our communities. So.
Yeah, I think for me, the short answer is corporate honesty, right? That idea that you want to be able to be your whole self, your authentic, honest, empowered, self-actualized self at anything you're doing professionally. And so, you know, I had shared with Sarah Beth too, I had an experience where I was working at a place in Chicago, and we had started a nonprofit sort of on the side to help empower more creative people in Chicago to serve nonprofit clients. So we started this whole system design strategy, which was a nonprofit, and I got frustrated because I felt like I couldn't talk about that inside of the office at that time. This was 10 years ago or so. And I felt like it just kind of got pushed down, like that's not as important as this corporate project we're working on right now. And how does that apply to this particular problem? And it applied a lot, you know, and then my husband has his master's in nonprofit management, and that sort of thinking and understanding applies a lot, right? So we need more corporate honesty about like what does everybody bring to the table. So I think that's the sort of user-centered idea. And then from an employer perspective, I'd love to bring in people that have a depth of skill and knowledge. A UX designer that's working with us right now, he's amazing because he's really good at UX design. And he also travels the world and has these amazing experience stories that he can share and are often applicable and metaphoric and beautiful to the clients we're working with. So I think about that a lot.
So mine probably comes from a different perspective. We live in a VUCA, volatile, uncertain, whatever the C is, ambiguous world where we've got a lot of things changing, right? And we are facing some pretty daunting challenges. We've got probably the greatest existential crisis humanity's faced in climate change and the ramifications from that. And the only way we will continue or be able to address these challenges where you see rapid population shifts and moving and areas become completely uninhabitable, an uninsurable world, is having people that understand the complexity of these situations and that there's not a silver bullet, and that you need to understand the human factors of the equation, you need to understand the technology of the equation, you need to understand the business side of the equation to make all of those pieces work. Because if we don't, we genuinely don't have the opportunity to solve some of these daunting challenges. And if we have more hybrid professionals who can translate the R&D to the C-suite, who can take that C-suite information and communicate that to your general audience, who can create who bring in the environmental side, that recognize that what they're doing can make the world a better place, and that we can build organizations and companies that have impact in mind and not solely maximizing shareholder value, which is important. So my perspective, and the reason I think hybridity is important, is that I think that's the only way we're really gonna get this hard shit done. As if we recognize our strengths and recognize that we don't fit into these individual silos, and the world to solve those hard problems isn't gonna let us work in silos forever, right? We truly need to come across and come together as organizations. So that would probably be my parting shot on hybridity, is the more we can play together and understand each other's skill sets and build our organizations around those skill sets, the better chance we have to continue to prosper.
So I'm going to leave with a place-based thought, since that's the space I work in. So I grew up in an industry town in Montana, Anaconda, Montana, if any one of you have been there. So it was at one point the West equivalent to New York City. So the third most historic theater in the country is there, a lot of great cultural assets, all these amazing things. When the industry left, either the people left, or there was like this purpose, this inner purpose left from the people. And it's just really kind of made me think, when the purpose of a place leaves, either the people leave or their own inner purpose leaves. So having these hybrid identities that you can fall back on when your one professional identity is no longer, really is, I think, a key to really kind of resiliency, and really just picking yourself back up and moving forward, and also just this bigger picture of what's your purpose.
I just want to say that I love that. That's a great answer.
Brian often reminds me that this is like the Care Bear stare, that all of your hybridity is all of your superpowers, and together that is why you are so powerful. So what is your Care Bear stare? That's why people want to hire you. That's what the world needs. Go figure that out. I used to work at CU, so that idea of the jobs of tomorrow don't exist today. That's the opportunity here that we can design for and create our own roles and jobs and purpose. And I used to consult a lot of students that were like, how do I pick a major? And it's you could be a hybrid student. This isn't just about professional identity. This is about you figuring out your life and your passions and your interests and how they're interrelated, the connections between them. Yes, you can babysit on the side and be an engineering degree and have an internship with some company. Those things all fit together. So just know that this is lifelong work. The last thing I just want to mention, I created a workbook because people ask me all the time on the tools and the tricks and the identity math. So if you want a copy of that, you can talk to me after or go to my website. But I'd love to open it up to hear from any of you what's on your mind. Questions? Oh my gosh, I'll start here.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Andrea, and among other things, I'm the technology columnist for Cultures magazine, and our audience is really people who identify their personal identity is fluid. So my mom is from Chile, I grew up in Nebraska, I married a guy from France. So my cultural identity is a lot of ands, and I have 10 nationalities in my family. So I'm just curious, a couple of you have mentioned your personal identity, and I know I got so excited even growing up when I was able to check the other box on a survey of demographics, that was even a big deal. So I'm kind of curious how people's personal identity has informed their professional identities.
And that's a great point. Identity is fluid and dynamic, and it's multi-dimensional. I almost stepped on that. And so the fact that we're just teasing out professional identity is inaccurate, right? All of our work is influenced by so many different factors of ourselves. So who wants to talk about the connection of identities, your personal background?
So I feel like it's come full circle for me, and now I have the freedom to really I feel like they should be pretty similar or the same. You know, I feel like they should overlap quite a bit because that's just who you are, and it's hard to separate who you are. And that's kind of the problem, right? Is my personal identity this, my professional identity is this. And so, you know, like I said, I was born in Lithuania. My parents are immigrants. I'm Russian Jewish. I married a Southern Baptist from Oklahoma. You know, we had a very hybrid wedding, let's put it that way. But I really feel like that art side of me and being able, like, I loved the arts. It had nothing to do with technology 15, 20 years ago. But now I've been able to create and actually just create this space for women that sits at the intersection of art and technology, my two passions. And so I just think that when you kind of get out of the constraints of like, you know, sometimes you work for the right person and you're able to have that freedom. But when you're not and you're able to kind of get out of there and define the space for yourself, I really think those things should overlap quite significantly.
I think for me, the story that pops to mind is less cultural, but more about like personal identity meshing with professional identity as well. So, you know, I'm a mom, I have a 9-year-old, we're about to become foster parents, so I share that as this idea of, you know, how do you merge all your worlds together? And I feel like, you know, it's this notion of challenging, but also this idea of, you know, it's okay to own that and be honest about that and merge all of it together, just as we've been talking about with everything else and how we got here. So,
I saw a lot of hands, so I'm going to try and get as many as I can.
Thanks, and thank you so much for this panel. It's like food for my soul. I think it's helping a lot of us feel like we fit in somewhere. So, and I agree, it is the future. Another great quote that I've been saying lately is we're innovating for a world that doesn't exist yet. So it's similar to the quote you said a moment ago. So my question is, I'm a consultant, and I've had a long career of making lots of money for other organizations. So now I have my own firm, and my challenge has been describing my elevator speech to folks. So I was just wondering if you all could talk a little bit about how to pull that together.
My quick little recipe and see what they have to say is starting with like, hi, I'm Sarah Beth. I'm a hybrid. I am this artist, educator, researcher, and it helps me to solve problems in the space of education by bringing ideas and visual thinking together. Boom. So it gives enough of like the hybrid, my core professional identities, and quick definition. My goal is just to pique their curiosity and have them engage in a bigger conversation or go to coffee or let me email them or whatever those follow-on steps are. But I want to be unique and different and novel by like catching them off guard, but giving them tangible words they can also plug into and not just too much jargon. That's been my trick.
I'll share sort of a shameless plug of some work that we just did, but I think it's helpful to everybody in the room. We just did a toolkit for Techstars. It's toolkit.techstars.com. And in that toolkit, there's a topic on just elevator pitching, and it's awesome. It's really good. This woman, Nicole, who works at Techstars in Boulder, is the teacher of the content, and it's stellar. I think it's helpful if you're thinking about your career path as your entrepreneurial pursuit to tell that story. So check it out.
I noticed that the primary, a lot of you kind of come from either established jobs or before you made a big lead transition, so you had like some fallbacks, some level of recovery in case you fall. My last traditional job was around 3 years ago, where it drove me insane and I kind of stayed away from the corporate world. Did gig after gig, and now unfortunately trying to return back to it after a full brand revitalization and just a redo of who I am as an actual person. What advice do you have for those that are trying to come into a field as a hybrid, who either don't have the full clout that they're claiming to have as, or maybe don't have the amount of work or portfolio that needs to be done? I'm doing creative work generally every single day until something bites, but I ultimately feel like it's just pure luck, because networking feels just kind of pointless sometimes.
So after I left ASU, I am just an eclectic human being in general, but a yoga instructor and football and a whole bunch of other great things. And I took 6 months off when I left ASU. I left because I had sort of my core shaken and wanted to see what I truly valued. And so I went teaching yoga full time and was assessing the landscape and was able to get some consulting gigs in the work that I had formerly done. Almost agreed to hop in as the chief product officer in a cool med device company again, and then I realized I don't want to do that. Like I went to that spot where I was 7 years ago before that first ASU job of like, oh, I could do this or this or this or this, and all of them kind of like scared the heck out of me, right? And I was fortunate enough to, in that time, reflect back and go back and see what made me the happiest was working with students and helping people find their passion and economic development. So I was able to land, fortunately, in a similar role to what I had left, but emphasize those things that were exciting to me. Were I in a different position, what I was trying to do was leverage my network that I had built already and get, again, somebody to vouch for me, even if it would have been a volunteer opportunity initially to get started. It sucks. Let me take this back. If you're not in a financial position to be able to weather it, it sucks to volunteer your hard time and energy and ability, but that unfortunately might be what you need to do initially to build up the portfolio that you want to have to get somebody to take a chance on you or get somebody in your network. I know you said networking sucks, it does. Some people love it, right? There's some people that let's go to coffee every half hour. Yeah. And me, yeah, that's my morning, and then don't talk to me in the afternoon, right? I used to be a pure extrovert. Now I talk to too many people, and I'm like, I'm cool, we're good. But leveraging your network to either give you a chance, and hopefully someone can vouch for you, working, bugging the hell out of people that are doing cool work that you want to do, and getting them to even maybe get you some volunteer hours or get that coffee with them. Literally, I would LinkedIn anyone you can that has a job that's similar to what you're hoping to do, offer to take them out for a coffee, maybe 1 out of 50 accept, pick their brain, see what they did, get someone to invest in you, because if you come across and we sit down and I'm like, yeah, this is a cool guy, he cares, he wants to do it, he's gonna make an effort, then they're gonna make the next intro for you that might get you in the door for the next time. But this is the hard part where the answer is, you gotta just keep pushing and doing some there's not a silver bullet again. It's like, take the meetings, be proactive, do volunteer work, hope someone again will vouch for you, because we are there's gonna be 9 billion of us in a couple of years, right? So you gotta figure out what's your differentiator, what distinguishes you, and who is doing what you're doing already, and figure out how they got where they are. I hope that helps.
I want to add on, actually, jog some memory for me too, because remember I started and said I was an art teacher, like who the heck was going to hire me beyond teaching art? But I built up an entire section of my resume that was special projects, and I was just saying yes to things and jumping into things that were interesting and volunteering my time to build up leadership, to build up my reputation, to build up my credibility and my network. Jim Stevens, a friend of mine who's in the background, back 5 years ago, early years of Denver Startup Week, him and I put on a design challenge as a session for youth during Denver Startup Week, because we didn't see that. We're like, what if we just go do this session and figure out this thing? And like, it put us in front of people we wouldn't have been exposed to. It gave us more experience in like building our abilities as that kind of designer. And I was trying to shift out of my lane. So there was sort of this sense that over time I was building more leadership and more experiences that showed people I was worth and able to do things, and it opened up new doors. So I think it's that go knock on doors, go try things, and go experiment. I think Brian's actually a king of that. Like, he creates collaborations and partnerships relentlessly, and a lot of times you did it of goodwill. You're like, yeah, I'll just pitch in. And he's done that enough now where it turns the machine, and now hopefully people are knocking on your door, they know who you are? Always. Okay, so combo effort. I'm gonna just do questions on this side of the room because I was favoring that side, but if there was still a hand over here, I'm gonna go that way.
So we talked about how to get hired. My question is more around how to find that job. If we don't have a title that we're looking for, how do we know what we fit into?
Innovation, everyone's hiring for innovation. I think this is the language thing again, and I'm gonna throw it over here. Who wants to answer?
I'll go first. Well, I'll just say that's where the try bread comes in, right? You gotta just keep on trying things. So I would say don't put too much stock into one thing again, right? Just like do as many things as you possibly can. I think it's really what everyone's up here is kind of talking about. It's just a numbers game. So, you know, eventually someone's gonna give you that opportunity. I did want to just kind of say one more thing though, coming into all of this, because I do think this is really interesting. So I like to look to extremes to see like, you know, what have these people who are like really kind of working in these extreme conditions, like how are they figuring it out? So we have a panel called Business is a Drag, and it's really a drag queen who's going to be building multiple identities through her session, and then relating like what she's learned about really creating all these multiple identities to business challenges and business like solutions and all of this. So I would say that's on Wednesday. I would suggest going to that because that's gonna be super fun. And that's my designer track pack coming on right now. Anyone else?
And then, yeah, so you're in the right place, right? I think the best opportunity you have for that probably is working in a startup or finding a startup or founding a startup, which is easier said than done. It's hard, 90% of people don't really want to do it, but that's probably the best option you have initially to like get a touch of everything, right? You get the whole smorgasbord, you can say, I love this, I love this, I love this, I don't want to do that again, and you've got a lot more flexibility to do that if you're building your own company or, again, higher ed fortunately offers this as an option. There's a little bit more flexibility built into higher education, which is why I've gravitated there or a startup and not really anywhere in between recently. So I think looking for those or creating your own, which is what my colleagues here and I have all done at one point or another. Yeah, I think that's about it.
I hear the challenge, the pain point around looking through Indeed or LinkedIn job descriptions and sort of trying to figure out which one makes the most sense or might rise to the top and be close enough, perhaps. So, you know, pursuing those, and then this might sound rather forward, I suppose, but you know, there's times that I've had interviews and then I've sort of tried to write the job description a little bit sharper based on what I know I can bring, and sometimes it's worked and sometimes it hasn't, to be honest, but there's a value add there for the employer if you're willing and able and honest about the fact that you could certainly rewrite that job description a bit. And of course you don't want to like overhaul the whole thing because it's a little bit too much, but there's sharpnesses that you could bring. For example, there's a friend of mine from Chicago. I was just coaching her when she moved to New York City. There was a strategist job available at a place that does public policy design. And she really wanted to work there, but she knew she could bring a lot more than the job description was articulating. So in the informational interview, and I think the first interview, she was just kind of like working it a little bit, you know, crafting it with the founder of the design firm to say like, is there room for me to play in this place? And you know, if there is, then everybody wins. You both win, right? So stepping into that, if you're comfortable with it and experimenting at least with what that can mean is really powerful.
Just one little tidbit. So if you know what your strengths are, and you know, but it doesn't fit nicely into a job description. Another thing you can do, like I know I'm a visionary, a creator, and a connector. I can say who are the most visionary people I know, and it doesn't matter what they do. Who are the visionaries in the industry, the people I know, and you go meet with them and you find out what they do and how they use that talent. Or like connector, who are the people I know that just connect people? I just think of them as connectors. And then figuring out what it is that they do and just kind of starting to narrow it down that way. So working kind of designing from the like outside in and saying, what is it that I bring to the table? Who are other people that are strong in this? What is it that they do? And then what do I want to do?
Okay, we have time for maybe one more. Burning questions. Oh man, 3 just shot up. Tony.
Hi, my name is Tony Smith. I recently ran for public office, and in part of that process, it started with November 2016. I woke up thinking we all need to feel represented and have a connection to local government, and for me that meant authenticity. And so as part of the campaign, it was all about being a hybrid person. My yoga side, my volleyball side, my community connector side. But I use social media to do that. So how do you guys use social media to portray your hybridity, if that's a word?
That's right. Yeah. Social media branding part of this. Thoughts?
I just got a lot of dog pictures. Hopefully you like bulldogs, because I got some like really adorable bulldog pictures. But other than that, that's a better question for my wife, who's not here.
For us, we have the Burrow and Black channels, of course, and then we have, then I have mine. And until recently, I was, posting pictures of our son and, posting pictures of stuff we do and things. But then I decided to sharpen my personal stuff into like sharing what I'm learning every day, to share that personal side of, here's what I'm reflecting on, here's what I'm learning, because of course it applies to on the professional side. So that's just a strategy that I've kind of adopted really recently, probably in the last couple of months, to tell that story.
I think for me, it depends on who the audience is of the social media platform. So, when I think about Instagram and Founder, that's a very different audience that we try to talk to and connect with versus Instagram, my private account, which is just my friends, and then LinkedIn, which is really my professional identity. And, I don't know, I know this probably sounds like I'm talking out of both. You got me really thinking now, because I'm like, if it should overlap, your personal and your professional, then why wouldn't you bring that forward on all those channels, right? But then my other side of me, when I think about branding and being able to tell the story of whatever it is you're trying to move forward, sometimes you have to be curated in that message and like can't be all over the place either. So that's a really good question, and I think one thing is just knowing who your audience is and what you're ultimately trying to achieve or communicate in that channel, and then being authentic and hybrid within that channel and that audience.
Just one thought on that. I think it's this idea of math that's coming up for me, of how are you representing why all these different identities are related. Like, yes, you're doing volleyball one day, and then you're speaking over here the next, and then you're at the office. But why? Like, what is the through line and the thread that it makes you no matter where you're showing up? This is all important to you and part of how you live and work and play. And however you tell that story in your description, I think how you're captioning why you use that photo and why it's representing your values, and that authenticity is sort of what's coming up for me.
Yeah.
Oh, Scott, great, okay, echoing that. Okay, last one, just because there was a couple more hands, I'm gonna go over here.
Hi, I had a question. If anyone has ever experienced attention, when you are wearing all these different hats, if there's a time in which you have to really focus and come back to maybe more core attributes, or is it also just a question of following your curiosity, your creativity, and just kind of going with that which interests you? I'm definitely interested if there's tension at any point.
So the tension and struggle between serving these competing identities, how do you deal with that? Thoughts? Brian?
Well, I'm such a feeler, and I've definitely done things where it put too much tension on all of the identities, thinking that maybe my mind's saying, oh yeah, go do this, this is an opportunity, but like in my gut, being like, no, this is not an opportunity, this is not an opportunity. I think I've just learned to trust my gut, even though my brain is like, no, do it. So I think it's just, you'll find where those tensions are, and then hopefully you just try to avoid them. But I think, again, it goes back to the try bridge. You gotta try it before you know if there's a tension.
I want to bring it to Karen. Karen, you were telling me how you just had this learning attitude, and you kept like experimenting and pushing yourself. Do you remember that?
Yeah. So instead of always thinking, like, two things. One is, instead of thinking, a lot of times people come at things with, no, you can't do that. That's not possible, you can't. I always reframe the question of, how might I? So when there is the tension, or when you're trying to solve problems, like, how might we be able to do this? And when there is that tension, I've taught myself over time to be still. And just, because I'm such a solver, like, I gotta fix it. If there's tension, I gotta fix it. And I don't know, but like, I think part of it is just being still, and kind of that intuition and gut, and like letting things unfold the way that they should. in trusting in that. So, but that can do that learning that, like, how might I, how can I solve this? How, instead of putting barriers and roadblocks up, how may I, how can I?
My last comment on that is when I'm not serving all of my different identities, I actually feel my worst. Like when I'm just the artist, I don't feel fed enough. I felt restricted. If I'm just teaching all the time, that drains me. But when I get to unite and cross over and move between them, then it's like, oh, I get to serve all the parts of myself that want to come up. I don't have to like close one off. So finding those moments of when there's tension, why is there tension? What is that? Why is that happening? And then how do I find the doorways between the different identities so they play together and get to like compromise and coordinate and collaborate, because then I come back into like me being my fullest instead of parts just one at a time. That's just my own stuff. I want to mind that we are really at the end of time. I would love to talk to you all after the session. I can stay. I'm sure panelists are around too. I have to give a really huge thank you to Denver Startup Week and the sponsors and the track leaders, Castle and Brian. It's been such a pleasure to have this time with you. Thank all of you for coming and making time out of your day. So thanks, panelists. It's been a pleasure, and can't wait to talk with you more. Good luck with being a hybrid.
I'm gonna